It was a seemingly ordinary day when 8-year-old April Tinsley stepped out of her house to visit a friend. She vanished without a trace, leaving her family, the community, and even the police desperate for answers. In the days that followed, an eerie and puzzling mystery began to unravel. Someone who remained anonymous started leaving cryptic messages scattered across the city, hinting at their involvement in April's disappearance. With every clue, it seemed the detectives were getting closer to a breakthrough, but the shocking truth would only be uncovered after decades of uncertainty. April Tinsley was born on March 18, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. As the eldest child in her family, she was deeply involved in her local community, singing in the church choir and excelling in school. But what truly defined April was her love for simple pleasures, spending time with her friends, walking the streets of her neighborhood, and enjoying life in a carefree world. On the afternoon of April 1st, 1988, she returned home from school earlier than usual, her excitement palpable. She was eager to go out for a walk, to visit her close friend Nicole, who lived just a few minutes away, a short 300 meters from her house. As her mother had done countless times before, she agreed, giving April permission. Their neighborhood was calm, safe, and familiar. She handed her daughter an umbrella, the sky starting to hint at rain, and reminded her to call once she arrived at Nicole's house. The sun was nearing its descent, and a sense of peace blanketed their quiet town. But what was supposed to be a routine visit to a friend's house would turn into a tragedy that would haunt a community for years to come. April was supposed to call her mother, but when the time came, she didn't. Her mother, growing anxious, assumed April had been caught in the rain and immediately phoned Nicole's house. The answer she received was perplexing. Nicole's mother explained that April and Nicole had been playing at a nearby park. But when it started to rain, April realized she had left her umbrella at Nicole's house. April had told Nicole she'd go back for it and return home just as she'd promised her mother. But soon after, Nicole left to visit another friend, and the girls parted ways. Strangely, Nicole's mother revealed that April never returned for her umbrella, even though she had left the park nearly an hour earlier. This news made April's mother panic. She quickly told her husband that their daughter was missing, and the search began. Neighbors, upon hearing of the disappearance, joined in, and together they combed the streets between Nicole's house and the park. Unfortunately, they found nothing. In desperation, the parents contacted the police. Officers arrived, gathered a description and a photo of April, and launched their search. Within hours, a growing number of concerned neighbors rallied to help, but despite everyone's efforts, there was still no sign of April. As the hours passed and darkness fell, the police began to suspect the unthinkable. April might have been abducted, or something else had gone terribly wrong during her walk home. By the time the search had stretched across the entire town, it seemed as though April had simply vanished into thin air. The hunt for her continued for 3 days, but all efforts were in vain, until April 4th, when a jogger running through fields about 30 kilometers from her home stumbled upon something horrifying. What appeared to be a human body lying motionless in a ditch sent a chill through the man. Upon closer inspection, it was clear. It was April. She was dressed in her usual clothes, but curiously, one shoe was missing. At first glance, there were no signs of obvious injuries on her body, but the police were almost certain that foul play had occurred. They believed she had been murdered somewhere else, with her body dumped in this isolated ditch. As investigators scoured the area, they found an unusual item nearby, an adult toy. Though it seemed unrelated, they couldn't rule it out. A few hundred meters from the body, April's second shoe was found across the road, further complicating the case. Forensic experts quickly confirmed the grim cause of death: strangulation. Their analysis suggested that she had suffered significant violence and that her death occurred no more than 2 days prior to the discovery of her body. This meant the killer had kept her alive for some time after her abduction. With no FBI database and DNA technology still in its infancy, detectives had no choice but to rely on traditional methods. Luckily, the case would soon take a turn. The police, desperate for leads, turned to the public, and the response was overwhelming. Among the many tips, 2 stood out. The first came from a man who claimed to have passed by the location where April's body was found. He recalled seeing an old blue van parked on the side of the road. Was this the van that the killer had driven to dispose of April's body? The second lead was even more promising. A woman living along the route between the park and Nicole's house came forward with a crucial piece of information. She had witnessed something strange. A blue van, moving slowly down the road with no apparent purpose, caught her eye. Inside, a man with dark hair and a mustache was behind the wheel, driving through the otherwise quiet street. The woman found this odd enough to remember, and once the news of April's disappearance broke, she immediately contacted the police to report it. Soon after, another witness came forward. This man had seen a blue van parked near a local gas station around the time of April's disappearance. His description of the driver matched the one provided by the first witness. Now the police had a lead: a blue van and a man fitting a certain description. The puzzle was starting to take shape, but they still lacked the critical piece of evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation deepened, the pressure on the police to find April's killer intensified. The blue van and the mysterious man remained the focal point of the investigation. Detectives were certain they were closing in on the culprit, but the breakthrough they desperately needed seemed just out of reach. Then, something strange began to unfold. Just days after April's body was discovered, the city was rocked by an eerie development. Cryptic, handwritten notes began to appear in several locations. Each one contained strange messages, as though someone was confessing to the crime. Were these genuine confessions, or was someone trying to mislead the investigation? The police were left scratching their heads, unable to make sense of the mysterious notes. The police were relentless in their pursuit of the person behind the mysterious notes. They meticulously analyzed the handwriting, hoping to uncover a clue that could finally lead them to the killer. But the notes seemed to hold no direct link to April's case, leaving investigators frustrated. Just when it seemed like they were at a dead end, a new lead surfaced. A witness who had been reluctant to speak up earlier now came forward with a crucial piece of information. On the day April vanished, they had seen a man acting strangely in the area where she was last spotted. The man was tall, had dark hair, and wore a baseball cap and jacket, strikingly similar to the description of a suspect seen driving a blue van near the scene. The witness was able to recall more details, which gave the police a new direction to follow in their investigation. The investigation into the blue van soon escalated, with the police focusing all their attention on tracking down its owner. Weeks of tireless searching eventually paid off when they discovered the van belonged to a man named John Miller, a local resident with a disturbing criminal history. Without wasting any time, the police brought him in for questioning. Miller, a 32-year-old man with a checkered past, vehemently denied any involvement in April's disappearance. He insisted he was simply passing through the area that day and had no connection to the girl. But the detectives weren't buying it. They knew there was more to the story. As they dug deeper into Miller's past, they uncovered a terrifying pattern. He had been arrested multiple times for offenses ranging from assault to theft, but the most unsettling revelation was that Miller had a disturbing obsession with young girls. The letters, signed with the ominous initials J.M., only served to strengthen the growing belief that Miller was behind it all. Even more disturbing were the details in the letters, which contained information about April's abduction that had never been made public. These revelations only deepened the detectives' conviction that Miller was the person they were looking for. However, despite these eerie clues, they still lacked solid evidence to make an arrest. The police knew they had to act quickly, but they couldn't take any chances. They needed to be absolutely certain before moving forward. As the investigation into April Tinsley's murder dragged on, the case began to feel like an unsolvable puzzle. For years, the letters kept coming, each one more cryptic and chilling than the last. The killer's persistence baffled the police, but despite their best efforts, the case seemed to be at a standstill. However, in 2004, something incredibly strange happened that would give the investigation new life. A man named John D. Miller was arrested for an entirely unrelated crime. While in custody, he casually mentioned to a fellow inmate a case involving a young girl named April. His offhand comment seemed innocent enough, but it was enough to pique the curiosity of the authorities. Soon, investigators were diving into his background and making shocking connections to the Tinsley case. When a DNA test confirmed Miller's involvement in April's murder, the case that had stumped the police for so many years was finally solved. It turned out that Miller had been living right under their noses, working as a truck driver with a long history of criminal activity. His arrogance, his twisted letters, and his blatant disregard for the law had ultimately led the police straight to him. The trial of John D. Miller was nothing short of a media frenzy. People who had followed April's case for years were left stunned as they finally witnessed the man who had eluded justice for decades face the consequences of his horrific crime. Throughout the trial, Miller remained eerily emotionless, but his smug attitude was enough to ignite a fury in the prosecutors, who were determined to ensure he would never walk free again. When the verdict came, it was a moment of mixed emotions for the Tinsley family. Miller was found guilty of April's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. While the conviction provided some long-awaited justice, it could never replace the pain of losing their precious daughter. The case may have been closed, but the scars would never fade. However, the investigation didn't stop at just this murder. Detectives dug deeper, and it turned out that Miller was involved in other horrific crimes. In 1999, while working as a truck driver, he killed 3 men who were later identified as his victims. These murders were also committed using a firearm, and the bodies were found in various locations. When John Miller was arrested, investigators concluded that he might be responsible for a series of crimes, but for a long time, it wasn't clear whether all these murders were connected. In 2024, he was found guilty of the murders of all these victims and was executed for these crimes. With each passing day, his crimes become more terrifying and grim, revealing a string of mysterious and brutal acts. Although the April Tinsley case was closed after his arrest, the memory of her tragic death lives on. The story of this girl has become a symbol of the fight for justice and a reminder of how important it is to continue seeking answers, even when it seems like there are none. Share your thoughts on this case in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new investigations.